The sterile fluorescent lights flickered as Jessica lay on the hospital bed, heart racing, a cold sweat trickling down her back. Outside, her father's voice boomed through the corridor, echoing with a mix of anger and embarrassment. "She's just unemployed," he declared, his words slicing through the tension like a knife. Jessica felt the heat rise in her cheeks, a mixture of humiliation and fury. She was more than just a failed job seeker. She was a soldier, a daughter, and this moment felt like the culmination of every disappointment she had faced. The doctors exchanged glances, their expressions mingled with concern and confusion. Suddenly, a uniformed officer entered the room, his crisp blue uniform stark against the stark white walls. "Where's Colonel Jenkins?" he asked, scanning the room with a steely gaze. Jessica's heart sank. Her father's military legacy loomed large, and she felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. "I'm right here," her father replied, puffing out his chest. The officer turned, his eyes locking onto Jessica, and she felt small, trapped in a world where her identity was questioned. "Your daughter needs support, Colonel," the officer said, his tone serious. Jessica's breath quickened. This was more than a medical emergency. It was a wake-up call. Months earlier, the sun shone brightly over Fort Bragg, illuminating the training grounds where Jessica stood, her heart pounding with anticipation. This was her dream, to follow in her father's footsteps and prove herself worthy of the family legacy. But as she faced the rows of recruits, doubt gnawed at her. "Welcome to the 82nd Airborne!" the commanding officer shouted, his voice booming across the field. "Today, you begin your journey!" Excitement coursed through her veins, but so did the pressure to succeed. She was Colonel Jenkins' daughter, and the weight of that title felt suffocating. Training commenced, each day a grueling test of endurance and will. The early mornings blurred into late nights, and Jessica fought to keep up. But whispers of doubt from her peers followed her like shadows. "You think you're special because of your dad?" one recruit sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. Jessica clenched her fists, determined not to show her weakness. Yet, the fear of failure loomed over her like a storm cloud. Each drill was a reminder of her struggle, and the pressure to perform was relentless. She wanted to make her father proud, but the fear of disappointing him clawed at her insides. The weeks dragged on, and Jessica found herself battling not only the physical demands of training, but also the emotional turmoil within her. Early mornings turned into a blur of exhaustion and self-doubt. One fateful day, during a live fire exercise, everything came to a head. "Jenkins, you're up!" Sergeant Lewis barked, his eyes sharp as he gestured for her to take her position. Jessica's heart raced as she stepped forward, the weight of her weapon heavy in her hands. She could feel the eyes of her peers on her, their expectations suffocating. But when it was time to fire, she froze. The adrenaline surged, and panic set in. What if I fail? The thought spiraled in her mind, paralyzing her. In that moment of hesitation, the round went wild, missing the target completely. Laughter erupted from the sidelines, and her face burned with shame. As the drill concluded, Jessica felt the weight of her failure crushing her spirit. "You're a liability, Jenkins," Sarah whispered, her voice laced with scorn. Jessica's heart shattered, the words echoing in her mind. She felt like a fraud, a soldier who couldn't even handle a simple exercise. After the disastrous exercise, Jessica withdrew into herself. The laughter of her peers haunted her, and the pressure to prove herself felt insurmountable. She spent late nights in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, questioning her choices. Why did I think I could do this? One evening, her phone buzzed with a message from her mother, a beacon of hope in her dark world. "We believe in you, Jess. Remember, you're stronger than you think." Tears filled her eyes as she read the words, but the encouragement felt like a flimsy bandage on a deep wound. The following week, the final evaluation loomed. The fear of failure gripped her tighter than ever. This is it, she thought, her stomach churning. But the night before the evaluation, a storm rolled in, rain pounding against the barracks. The chaos outside mirrored the turmoil inside her. As she lay in her bed, the thunder rumbled like her own inner doubts. "What if I fail again?" she whispered, panic rising in her chest. But deep down, a flicker of determination ignited. She remembered her mother's words and the strength of her teammates. "I can't give up," she resolved, clenching her fists. The day of the evaluation dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the stormy night before. Jessica stood in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her, a blend of fear and determination. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, the weight of expectation heavy but not unbearable. As they gathered for the evaluation, the atmosphere crackled with tension. "Today is your chance to show what you've learned," Sergeant Lewis announced, his voice firm. Jessica felt her heart race, the stakes higher than ever. She needed to prove herself, not just to her father, but to herself. The evaluation began, and Jessica focused on each task, pushing through the doubts that threatened to drown her. She navigated the obstacle course with newfound determination, each step a declaration of her strength. "I'm not giving up," she thought fiercely. But just as she was gaining momentum, disaster struck. During a critical drill, she faltered again, the fear creeping back in. "Not again," she thought, panic rising. But this time, she remembered her mother's words, the bond with her teammates, and the strength she had found within herself. With renewed resolve, Jessica pushed through, leading her team to success despite the odds. As they crossed the finish line, cheers erupted around her. She had done it. She had proved herself. The weeks following the evaluation brought a new sense of camaraderie among the recruits. Jessica felt the weight of her achievements, but she also understood that the journey was far from over. The military life was not just about physical strength. It was about mental resilience. Then came the notice of deployment. The 82nd Airborne was being sent overseas for a critical mission. The atmosphere was charged with excitement and anxiety as they prepared for the unknown. "This is what we trained for," Sergeant Lewis reminded them, his voice steady. Jessica felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was her moment to prove herself on a larger stage, but the weight of responsibility pressed down on her. "Will I be ready?" she wondered, the doubts creeping back in. As they boarded the plane, the reality of the mission set in. The sound of engines roared, and Jessica looked around at her fellow soldiers, each face a mix of determination and trepidation. "We're in this together," she reminded herself, clenching her fists. The plane soared through the clouds, and as they approached their destination, Jessica's heart raced. They were about to land in a war zone where every decision could mean life or death. The stakes were higher than ever. The plane touched down with a jolt, and Jessica's heart pounded in her chest as she prepared to disembark. The air was thick with tension, the sounds of distant gunfire echoing in the distance. This was no longer a training exercise. This was real. As they moved into the field, Jessica felt the adrenaline surge. They were deployed to secure a village being threatened by insurgents. The urgency of the mission heightened every sense, and she felt the weight of her responsibilities pressing down. "Stay low and move fast," Sergeant Lewis commanded, and they rushed forward, navigating through the brush. Jessica's heart raced as they approached the village, the chaos of battle surrounding them. Her training kicked in, but doubts loomed large. What if I freeze? Suddenly gunfire erupted, and chaos ensued. Jessica's instincts took over as she ducked behind cover, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Stay focused," she reminded herself, pushing through the fear. "Jessica, we need you on point," Sergeant Lewis shouted, his voice cutting through the noise. In that moment, she felt the weight of expectation again, but this time, it ignited a fire within her. "I can do this," she thought, determination flooding her veins. As they engaged with the enemy, the heat of battle intensified. Jessica's heart raced, and the adrenaline surged as she took her position. She could feel the weight of her weapon in her hands, a reminder of her training and her purpose. "Cover me!" she shouted to her teammates, her voice steady despite the chaos. She moved forward, navigating the terrain with precision. The sounds of gunfire echoed around her, but she focused on the mission, pushing through the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. Just as she reached a critical vantage point, a blast shook the ground beneath her. Jessica stumbled but regained her footing, adrenaline coursing through her. She spotted an enemy combatant preparing to take aim at her team. "No!" she thought, panic rising. In that split second, she fired her weapon, hitting the target squarely. The enemy fell, and a wave of relief washed over her. "I did it," she thought, adrenaline surging. But the battle was far from over. As the fight continued, Jessica felt a surge of determination. She fought alongside her comrades, each moment a testament to her growth and resilience. The chaos of battle became a blur, but with every decision she made, she felt more alive, more in control. After the intense firefight, the dust began to settle. Jessica looked around at her fellow soldiers, their faces a mix of exhaustion and relief. They had secured the village, but the cost was high. Her heart sank as she saw the injured being carried away on stretchers, the reality of war hitting her hard. "Stay strong, Jenkins," Sergeant Lewis said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did well out there." But the praise felt hollow against the backdrop of the wounded. Jessica's heart ached for those who had fought bravely, and the burden of loss weighed heavily on her. That night, as they gathered around a makeshift campfire, the mood shifted. The laughter that once filled the air was replaced by somber reflections. They shared stories of their journeys, the struggles they faced, and the sacrifices made. Jessica felt a deep sense of connection with her comrades, their shared experiences binding them together. As she listened, she realized that every soldier carried their own scars, both visible and invisible. "We're in this together," she thought, her heart swelling with pride for her newfound family. They were not just soldiers, they were survivors, each with a story to tell. Weeks passed, and the mission began to draw to a close. Jessica felt a mix of relief and sadness as they prepared to return home. The bonds formed in the heat of battle were unbreakable, and the thought of leaving her comrades was bittersweet. As they boarded the plane back to the United States, Jessica reflected on her journey. She had faced her fears, battled against doubt, and emerged stronger than ever. The soldier who had once doubted herself was now a warrior, ready to embrace her future. When they landed, the familiar sights of home brought a wave of emotion. As they stepped off the plane, Jessica's heart raced. Her father stood waiting, his expression a mix of pride and relief. "You did it, Jess. I'm so proud of you," he said, pulling her into a tight embrace. In that moment, Jessica felt the weight of expectation lift. "Thank you, Dad. I finally understand what it means to be a soldier," she replied, tears of joy streaming down her face. As they walked together, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. Jessica had proven herself not just to her father, but to herself. She was no longer just Colonel Jenkins' daughter. She was Jessica, the soldier, the leader, and a woman who had faced her fears and emerged victorious. As they stepped into the sunlight, Jessica felt a sense of purpose wash over her. The journey was far from over, but she was ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. Together with her family and comrades, she would face the future, prepared to forge her path and make her mark in the world.